Welcome to Me, Myself and Mind. We're a wellbeing company that specialises in mental and physical health, and these podcasts are designed to cover an array of different topics and subjects under the umbrella of wellbeing, having real and in-depth conversations with guest speakers to uncover their experiences, their knowledge, and to provide us with the insights that we can improve our own lifestyle. In this episode, we're joined by our special guest, Beth Woodward, a medical student training to become a doctor with keen interest in prevention and lifestyle intervention. But within the university programme, they get very little teaching on sleep, exercise and nutrition. So she's also gained qualifications such as nutritional advisor and personal trainer to expand her knowledge base. And during this podcast, we'll be discussing sleep, why it's important and how can it be improved, caffeine, the drug that's got a nation hooked, and what is circadian rhythm and how do we start to align ourselves to it. So without further ado, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a very new experience. So I'm currently in my 6th out of 7 years of training at university. 3 of those have been medicine, 3 of them have been biomedical sciences. And in the last couple of years, I've become more interested in kind of nutrition and lifestyle, and I realised just how important sleep was.
Yeah.
So I read the book Why We Sleep by the God, Professor Matthew Walker, and just learnt just how important it was through that and continued to carry on reading and learning about it. So here we are.
I think it's something that's not spoken about enough. With sleep, I feel like people almost are proud of how little sleep that they actually get.
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's like something we wear as a badge of honour,
Yeah.
almost.
It's almost like a competition, isn't it? We looked at some of the research, the average sleep of a Briton, within the UK, and we came up with 6 hours, 19 minutes was the average sleep per night, rather than being the full 8 hours.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Beth?
Well, it's definitely not enough. If we're thinking as sleep from the 1940s, I think it is, we've reduced the amount of sleep that we have on average by 20%. If you think of that in evolutionary terms, how slow things change, that's drastic.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that we're kind of advised to sleep between 7 to 9 hours. So under that, it's going to have detrimental effects on health.
And obviously, if we've evolved to do something that requires 8 hours of sleep, then, evolutionary,
important.
that's pretty important to us, isn't it? You know?
And like we've spoke about before, Dan, we spend a third of our lives asleep, and every single living creature on this planet sleeps to some degree. So that just says how important it is. And if we're meant to spend a third of our day doing it, it's something that if we, look at how we can improve it, it can really improve your well-being.
Do you think that the wider public have a real idea about how much sleep they should have and how important it really is?
I think people are aware that it is important, but I don't think just how important it is.
Yeah.
And I think the more research that comes out from the studies that have been done in animals and in humans, just the detrimental effects it can have. And I think as it becomes more popular and as wellness is becoming something that people are taking kind of ownership of, it will become, I hope. But then we've got the kind of society thing with caffeine, which we're going to talk about, I guess.
Yeah. And Netflix and TV and social media.
And all these things that are just not conducive to good sleep.
No. I suppose we're the only animal on the planet that's stopping ourselves from sleeping.
Yeah.
We think we're so advanced and we're putting so much pressure on ourselves with these jobs, the careers that we want to do well in, our aspirations. But the most fundamental thing that we need to evolve and to make us feel better is sleep.
And as just like an anecdotal thing, as a student, I know that there's people at university that will take drugs that will increase their concentration. I'm like, mate, I'm about getting a good night's sleep before my exams. And ever since I've kind of been more aware of sleep, I've done really well in kind of exams, and that's just, there's no evidence behind that. But personally, I found when I take it seriously, I've always woke up and felt ready to go, and concentration through the roof, like.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So we had a list here. We were saying about this 21st century, the fast-paced life, how it's affecting our sleep patterns. We've got a list, how we're working all of these shifts, continental shift patterns they have in factories or even just normal shops now. They're open 24/7. TV late nights, watching Netflix, as you just mentioned, social media, light exposure, alcohol consumption. How do you think shifts actually affect the individual?
Well, humans, we're kind of like all animals, I guess. We're creatures of habit, and in nature, there's rhythms. Everything, we exist in rhythms, in the circadian rhythm. So doing shifts is just, I don't fully know like the science behind it to be able to say fully, but it's not good for creatures that are designed to be in this rhythm where we get up at the same time every day, we go to sleep at the same time every day. And even when I've done night shifts, like how long it takes you to fully feel human again after that, you just know it's not good for you.
And people are doing that week in, week out, you know.
Yeah, and I'm not looking forward to having to do that as a junior doctor. Like,
No.
I'm not going to be a happy bunny, but, you know, someone's got to do it. It's just about what we can do to kind of minimise the effects.
And what would you suggest with that to, you know, if you are having to work, you know, later shifts and then you're coming into mornings, is there anything that you can do to make sure that you do get adequate sleep?
I think just this is what my understanding from, again, Matthew Walker and what I've read. This isn't because I'm not qualified to be given advice, but one thing that he did say that was really interesting is if you're a night shift worker, is in the morning when the sun comes up to try and minimise the amount of sunlight that you get, because then that's not going to signal, you know, it's time to get up, time to do things. And if you wear sunglasses as soon as you finish your shift and then get into bed and have a completely dark room, that can give you at least a bit of a decent sleep. It's not ideal, but that's kind of...
I do agree, because I had experience of shift work many years ago. I used to put black bin bags up on the windows to cut the light out. But the really bad feeling was afterwards when you had to sleep. It was like jet lag.
Yeah, literally that's what it's like. It's like there's the term being bounced around, like social jet lag is what loads of people are experiencing now, just from all the things that you've just talked about with the blue light, the alcohol, the caffeine. Like we're constantly just jet lagged essentially, because we're all out of sync.
So what do you think about, you know, late nights? People are, you know, finishing work later and then they're continuing their work at home and then they then watch TV. You know, what do you think about that affecting sleep patterns?
I think it's not, like I keep using this word, it's not conducive to good sleep, because if you're not giving yourself time, or you're telling your body like it's ready to relax, time to get ready for bed, and then you know yourself, if you have just an hour before you go to bed and you wind down, you get a good night's sleep. Whereas if you're working all the way up until you get into bed, that's you're never going to get a good night's sleep doing that.
Yeah, I was saying to my dad earlier, because one of our talks next month is about routines. And you know, building yourself up a good morning routine. And everyone's heard about this routine that can breed success, setting yourself up for the day. Why don't we look at a nighttime routine?
And I am such a sleep princess, so I have my routine down to a T, and I will not, obviously you can't always be like that, but when I'm at uni, from about 9 o'clock, all work stops, I'll relax, like have a bath, just chill out and do all these things that we know are good for us, that make us relax, and go to bed. I know exactly what amount of sleep that I need, and I find that that's really helped me.
Would you say that's about being consistent? You know, these sleep routines. It can't be erratic. You go to bed at the similar time every night to get that good sleep.
Definitely, and wake up at the same time every day, and wake up feeling awake. You know, you don't take half an hour to crawl out of bed. I just wake up and I'm ready to go.
You've got the energy. That's great. What about television sets? You know, we mentioned there's iPads, there's computers, the television sets within the bedroom now. It's almost like a mini office. What do you think about, as Dan mentioned before, you know, it's a late night. We could be tired, but we become overtired because we want to finish the end of that box set or the film. How do you think that impacts?
Well, there's two kind of things that I've learned about how TVs and iPads and phones can be negative. One of them is very sciencey, so we can talk about that.
Great.
iPads and phones emit blue light, which in the back of our eyes, we've got these receptors called melanopsin. And when they get triggered by these bright lights, that will signal to the pineal gland and the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which are all controlled in kind of circadian rhythms. They signal that it's time to get up. So if you're at night time looking at blue light, you're not going to be able to
Not
go
good.
to sleep properly.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, with all these really dramatic programs that we're watching on Netflix that are really entertaining and really good, they're like triggering your sympathetic nervous system, really emotional, really scary, all of these things before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So
I was, and again, I was talking with my dad about that earlier. People that watch the news at 10 and then they want to get to sleep by 11.
Yeah.
There's some pretty negative, horrible things on the news.
Definitely.
And imagine that playing on in your mind when you're trying to settle down and get into the parasympathetic and relax.
yeah,
I can't imagine it's an easy task. Or even, those murder documentaries that people
Yeah.
are obsessed with.
it's
I don't know.
all these things that you think they wouldn't have an impact, but when you look at them in combination with everything else that we're doing, they would have an impact. And
You'll probably find that you're downloading it. It's the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Consciously, you're not. You may not think you're downloading all of this negative information or even sounds.
yeah,
You may not even be watching the film. Your partner may be, and you're hearing it.
Yeah.
As you're nodding off to sleep.
That is an annoying one in our house. That Fleur likes to have the TV on to go to bed,
yeah,
and I love it to be completely dark.
yeah,
So she's there watching TV, or even just rolls over with it still on in the background, and I'm absolutely furious, trying to get to sleep. Like, when can I turn it off?
yeah,
But yeah, it
yeah.
does definitely affect you falling to sleep. I would think the TV being on in the room,
Your
definitely.
ability to relax.
You were saying, we were talking about on the way here about the Netflix you mentioned earlier, these box sets. Years ago, terrestrial TV, you just switched it off. Now there's a temptation, they play the next series, don't they? The next episode. So there's temptation again to just stay up and watch that.
Yeah.
And to finish it. And sometimes these programs have got a nation hooked and everybody's watching it. Everybody wants to know exactly, what's happening. I mean, I'll step away from that because I've got a TV personally myself. But I move away from that. But I think, do you think the social media again, I mean, whether it's the television set in your bedroom, it could well be the phone. People are scrolling through the phone and looking at whether it's emails or whatever that may be to entertain themselves. And that's the same thing, would you agree, with the blue light?
Yeah, absolutely. Unless I know that like Apple and all of the phone companies now are becoming more aware of blue light, so you can actually block it. But with that being said, there's still that negative, like if you're on Instagram and you see something that upsets you a bit or makes you feel a bit anxious, which happens to me all the time, that's not going to be very good for your sleep.
No.
Definitely not.
I don't have a TV in my room. There's obviously TVs in my house, but personally my room is for sleep. I try not to do any, I don't do any uni work in my room. I'll always do it at uni, just because to make my room like the ideal place to go to sleep.
The right environment. So we also looked at the University of Pennsylvania stating that people who get around the minimum 4.5 hours of sleep, they're far more angry and stressed and mentally exhausted. And another school of thought, that Harvard Medical School, stated that when people are stressed and anxious, it really impacts on the sleep, sleep deprivation and not getting off to sleep. What do you think about that, Beth?
I definitely agree with that being a thing. Just knowing for myself, if I'm underslept, feeling really irritable, really easy, like really emotional, like things upset me. But also if you're anxious, it's very difficult to fall asleep because you've got thoughts ruminating around your head. You can't, and I can definitely see that that's a thing. Yeah. And just, sorry, Dan, were you gonna?
No.
Because I'm on psychiatry placement at the moment. And it's amazing just how much sleep is important as part of the care of the patients, and when they're becoming unwell. And I'm working with a psychosis team, how part of the warning signs are if their sleep's impacted. So it's definitely an interesting point.
And is it almost like when somebody, is struggling with their mental health or feels anxious, you can't really pinpoint whether it's the sleep affecting, the anxiety, or the anxiety is stopping the sleep, because then I suppose it becomes a big spiral.
It's like a catch-22, isn't it?
And because, as I've learned studying medicine, it's so complex, it's hard to know for sure what's going on. Things impact everything else, but they're definitely playing off against each other.
Talking about anxiety, I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Chatterjee, and I think it was Matthew Walker. And they were stating that sleep deprivation can cause, the amygdala to activate, up to 60% more than when, you know, you're getting normal sleep. So if you think about it, you're going to become more emotional, you're going to be more irritable, you're going to feel high levels of anxiety a lot easier.
Definitely.
You know?
Like, we all know that ourselves. And just thinking about little kids, like if they miss their nap, just how angry they are. And everyone's like, oh, they're just tired. But you could maybe say that that's the reason. I don't know.
Has massive implications. We also discussed and looked at it, stating that chronic insomnia may increase the risk of developing mental disorders like anxiety and depression. What do you actually think on that?
Oh, I'm not too sure, to be honest, but I can definitely see why that would be a thing. But I'm not going to pretend that I know.
There was one fact. Sorry, Dan. There was one fact that was 10,000 subjects were studied with insomnia, and it stated that they were actually 5 times more likely to develop depression.
Yeah.
Because of that.
I suppose if the amygdala's, you know, active by another 60% and it's firing off, then I suppose you are going to develop some kind of mental health disorder or, you know, emotional disorders.
And
definitely.
Insomnia is just awful anyway. Like when there's been nights where I'm unable to sleep, but people that can't sleep at all, that must be horrible. No wonder they're going to become depressed or get a low mood.
Definitely.
And I think just talking about low moods and people not sleeping, some people reach for the liquid therapy, you know, the alcohol. So what do you think of alcoholic consumption, Beth?
I know that a lot of people drink alcohol at night as like they call it a nightcap, don't they, to make them fall asleep easier. And alcohol can cause you to like get off to sleep easier, but the quality of your sleep is impacted massively.
Interesting.
So we'll talk about the stages of sleep we can touch on it in a second. But it basically shortens the REM sleep that you have, and it just basically messes up the sleep cycle that you have, so you get less quality sleep, which I find really interesting.
So sorry.
Yeah, go on.
No, so I was going to say, so you're obviously getting off to sleep, but then you're missing out on important parts.
Like every part of the sleep cycle is important, but it kind of alters it. Disrupts the quality of your sleep that you have.
It is crazy because so many people are doing all of the things that we're speaking about, you know, drinking alcohol and
I know we have to be realistic about these things. You know, suddenly you're not just saying to everyone, cut out alcohol, cut out caffeine, do all these things, because it's just not, that's just not possible. But it's just to be aware of it. And definitely if you drink a lot of alcohol, to consider, or maybe, you know, to improve my sleep quality, if it's having all these beneficial effects, I should not drink it so much.
Maybe different interventions are needed rather than reaching for that substance. But again, with all of us, it's a habit, isn't it?
Yeah.
If somebody's had a stressful day at the office or wherever they are, first thing they're going to reach for is a glass of wine or alcohol, some form of alcohol.
But then I suppose that then perpetuates into getting less sleep, so then you're more sleep deprived, then you're more stressed, and then you reach for it again, and it's
just a vicious cycle of bad things.
We're going to be sleeping in a cave or something under the stars.
Just move to the outback in Australia.
You mentioned the 4 stages.
Yes.
Beth, do you want to cover some of that?
We can touch on that quickly. So in a sleep cycle, it's broken down into 4 stages. So you've got light sleep, which is stages 1 and 2. You've got stage 3, which is where deep sleep comes in. And then the first 3 stages are classed as non-rapid eye movement sleep. And then stage 4 is rapid eye movement sleep. So that's your REM sleep. And this whole cycle lasts about 90 minutes. It can vary person to person, but in general, it's about 90 minutes long. And one sleep cycle, when that's complete, and you say sleeping for 7.5 hours, you'll go through various sleep cycles. And from what I learned from Matthew Walker, is the ideal amount of sleep cycles that you need in one night is 5. So if, for me personally, I know that 5 sleep cycles for me is around 7 hours, 20 minutes. I've got my sleep cycle down to a T. So, and you should be aiming to get about 5. So it can take a bit of homework to work out exactly what your,
best for the individual,
you know, because it could be, you know, an hour and 10 minutes is your sleep cycle, could be 80 minutes. But it's important that you have to go through all of those cycles for a sleep to be quality and the quantity that you need.
Yeah. And how would somebody go about working out their sleep cycles?
So I guess if you're a sleep princess like me, I know what time I need to get up in the morning. So I get up about 10 to 6. I backtrack from 90 minutes backwards, and I know I need to go to sleep about 10:30 to get 7 hours 20 minutes. And the only reason I know that, I've got no scientific evidence for this, I just know that when I wake up at the same time every day, feeling like literally get out of bed straight away, feeling great. And so I will aim to be asleep by 10:30. So my kind of wind down starts about 10. So I'll read before I go to bed. I'll like journal, write down anything that's like might be causing me to feel like negative, or like just reflect on the day. And now that's become a consistent routine. When I do deviate from that, so when I have time off over Christmas, I feel so out of whack. I'm like, oh my God, get me back to uni so I can, wake up feeling
fresh.
Not dead.
That's good.
And do you think, lack of sleep or, poor sleeping habits have an impact on like poor lifestyle, choices, food choices, what we're drinking, what do you think?
So if you're tired, the quickest way to kind of feel less tired is to give yourself some energy. What's the quickest form of energy that we've got? Simple sugars. You're going to be craving all this stuff that's delicious, that, sugary drinks, sugary breakfast things. And this is kind of why it's a bit conspiracy theory, but like coffee shops play on this because they know that croissants and pain au chocolat are way more appetizing than a bowl of porridge. So they pound with your coffee because they know that most people are sleep deprived, and then they're going to buy these things that are sugary, and you want them because your body's like, oh, I'm craving this,
Maybe I'm a bit weird, but I go to my Costa early. I've got an early client, and I always get a coffee and I get the porridge. But there's piles of cakes and croissants, as you're saying. It's just like ridiculous temptation.
You don't really see the oats being advertised, do you? They're not there in the cabinet, just big piles of oats.
No, they're hidden away at the top shelf.
But it's the croissants and the really like tasty breakfast things that, or even just chocolate bars. Some people, I
suppose that can become an addiction then. When you're sleep deprived and then you're reaching for sugar to get a bit more of a high and a bit more alert.
Just to get through the day.
Yeah.
It's just easier to do that than to actually look at what you can do to make changes that's more sustainable and better for your health.
Yeah.
And that again, sorry, Don, that again is going to have a negative impact, isn't it? Whether you're going to school children or even work colleagues, especially with the school children, they're learning this information. There's so many exams these days. They've got an energy rush and then it crashes. It comes down after about 45 minutes, so that doesn't really set them up to conducive for learning, does it?
No. And going back onto what we was just talking about, I remember being at uni and we'd do all-nighters in the library, and you wouldn't exactly be on your diet the next day. You'd be, ordering pizzas, you'd be drinking, your full fat Cokes. You'd be all over the place. And that'd take a few days to then get back into sync of your normal sleep routine. So I can vouch for that, how you're craving something when you are major sleep deprived. Definitely.
And do you think, Beth, that just before we go into caffeine, that you can have too little or too much sleep? There's a fine balance.
So the recommendations kind of worldwide is that we have between 7 to 9 hours sleep, and I guess the background for that is this sleep cycles thing that we understand that you need adequate amount of sleep is between 7 to 9, varying on person to person. So less than that is going to have detrimental effects on health, which are evident in all of the kind of studies that are out there. If anyone's interested in those, Matthew Walker's book. But then also having too much sleep is also said to be bad, but I don't know exactly too much about that. But for an adult, any more than 9 hours, I guess.
It's probably too much. I found that myself. I like to get up early. I can get up, say, sort of quite easily at 5:30. But the weekends, if I'm sleeping until 8, getting up, that's late for me, a late sleep in. I feel sort of sluggish on that day. It takes a while to get going.
I mean, I definitely noticed over Christmas, my sleeping patterns, I became a lot more lazy. And, you can't just put it down to one thing, because I was sleeping longer means that, that was affecting me because I was also consuming a lot of alcohol and probably 1,000 a day excess calories. So that was going to have an impact. But when you're out of that routine, it's you feel very different, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that we were talking about in the car, which we're kind of relevant now, is as I was talking about this sleep cycle. If you wake up kind of when your alarm goes off and you're in the middle of REM sleep.
Yeah.
And have you ever woken up and just feel absolutely horrible, like you feel so tired, you need to go back to sleep, and then other days you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh, I feel fine. It depends where that alarm's interrupted your sleep cycle. So if you're you know, just letting yourself sleep in, and say the daylight or someone wakes you up in the house because it's 9 o'clock and they're not trying to be quiet and you feel horrible, that could potentially be a thing. It's also why if you've ever had a nap and it's been kind of over 30 minutes long and you don't feel any better for it, but if you have a quick power nap, like up to 30 minutes, you feel great, ready to go, because you've just had that little chunk of kind of the light sleep that's just been enough.
Have you ever had that when you've been on holiday? You've gone back to the room for like a power nap.
Yeah.
You've been there for about 2 hours and you get up feeling
like, what's going
horrendous. And then you don't want to leave then. You don't want to go back out.
Yeah.
No. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Right, Beth, so we're going to touch on caffeine. I mean, as me, myself and mine, we meet regularly at the Costa shop. You know, we think they're great, but we're not trying to give negative connotations. A little bit of research for them. There's 2,389 stores in the UK, and they've tripled the revenue within the past 10 years. So 2019, up to 2019, they've made around 1.3 billion, I think it's GDP.
That's mad.
That's the figure.
Crazy.
So it shows that a lot of people are going to Costa Coffee.
Yeah. Definitely. And I am one of them. Like, socially, I love coffee. I'm always in coffee shops, but
It can be
not everyone has decaf.
You
know?
Yeah. Are you on the decaf hype now?
Yeah, after 12 o'clock, a decaf all the way.
Yeah.
On that note, because we were looking at the caffeine and sleep disturbance, what are your thoughts on this affecting the sympathetic nervous system?
I guess it's helpful to explain like what caffeine does in the brain, like why we drink it. Yeah. So caffeine is a psychoactive stimulant. Yeah. And it has many, many effects in the body, but we won't go into. We'll be here all day. Yeah. But one of the things it does that helps you feel more awake is it blocks something called adenosine receptors.
Okay. Yeah.
And just touching briefly back on why we actually need to sleep is when our brain's busy doing its thing in the day, thinking, doing everything a brain does, the byproduct of all the energy kind of metabolism is adenosine. That can only be cleared when we're asleep. So this is the reason why we have to sleep. It can't be done in the day. It has to. Well, it could if you were sleeping in the day, but it can only be done when you're sleeping. So when you've got all this adenosine building around and you feel tired, you have coffee that blocks the caffeine blocks the adenosine receptors, therefore blocking that feeling of feeling tired. Yeah. And then when you get that caffeine crash, that when it's wore off, you've got more adenosine just carrying on building up because your brain's still doing its thing. You've got more adenosine, and then suddenly you get that crash. You're like, I need another coffee.
Oh gosh,
So I've probably gone way off topic from what your question was, but I think
that was great. Yeah. What the question on that? Are there any positives
to caffeine?
Yeah,
there is definitely some positives to it. So there was a massive systematic review, which is kind of one of the big ways we study lots of different studies in medicine, and they kind of determined that around 400 milligrams of caffeine a day is safe, and there may be some beneficial effects to your cardiovascular system, particularly on your vascular health. But I can't actually remember, so I'm not going to pretend that I do, but anything over that, there's not really any benefit to it. And especially kind of on those feelings that you get of the rush, I don't know how beneficial that is.
I know when we were discussing caffeine early consumption, we're down to probably 2 cups max a day. I mean, I used to have 4 or 5. I think Dan used to have 4 or 5, and it does make you feel jittery and anxious. Yeah. You know, when you have that amount of caffeine in the system, doesn't it?
I mean, struggling with anxiety in the past, I didn't even realise that I was haunted in my anxiety with 5 cups of coffee. And now I just look at that and I think, you idiot.
But like, even one of the things it does is it will increase your heart rate because it's a stimulant, and it does give you those physical sensations of activating sympathetic nervous system.
And we looked at dosages. We looked at, because there's a few products with caffeine in. Average coffee generally is 40 milligrams. Tea is around 11 milligrams. Diet drinks 32 to around 42. And the 250 ml energy drinks 80 milligrams. But the bigger ones, like we're talking about, maybe some of these big cans we were talking about before, 500 millilitres can be up to 160 milligrams. grams of
That's crazy
caffeine.
amounts.
Yeah, in one hit
One
as
hit.
well.
And it just going back to what you said about like an instant coffee is around 40 milligrams. Is that right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I think Costa,
Yeah.
just we don't need to pick on Costa, but
Yeah.
the coffee they have, I think it's 90 milligrams per shot. So if you have a medium cappuccino,
Yeah.
that's, I can't do maths, 240 milligrams of
Some-
caffeine in
yeah,
one drink.
yeah.
And some people have, 2 or 3 of those a day.
Right. I
That
was
is
going
a
in with a
lot.
large.
Yeah.
I was having like
You were
2
having one.
larges a day at some point. I was classing that as one coffee.
Yeah, that's
That-
crazy. And that's way over the 400 milligrams recommended amount of caffeine. And that's just for an adult with no kind of mental illness, not a pregnant woman,
Yeah.
not, an adolescent or a young.
Yeah.
That's just, a healthy adult. It's less or varies depending on,
It sounds, pretty crazy with the drinks. I mean, I go in there sometimes. I'll ask for just one shot. You were talking about,
Yeah.
because they put 2 shots in, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always choice. But again, it's habit, isn't it? When you get to the counter, whoever you are, you don't think about that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they should, but on the front of cigarettes, it shows 2 black lungs.
Yeah.
So should they put warnings about caffeine?
Yeah.
What it can or can't
I
do
think so.
for you?
Yeah, because I definitely think that would be interesting.
And I feel like people don't realise some of the drinks that do have caffeine in.
Yeah.
You know.
And even like green tea, that has caffeine in it.
Yeah.
And I think some brands have more than, normal tea.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, diet drinks, I didn't realise they had caffeine in until
Yeah.
recently. So
Doesn't chocolate has it? Didn't we have
Yeah.
a look at chocolate has caffeine in
Yeah.
again?
Yeah.
Obviously.
And then you're getting the sugar and the caffeine together.
yeah.
Sleep
And-
deprived.
And then we were saying, we were talking about it earlier, like the half-life of caffeine
Mm.
is about like 6 to 7 hours, depending on kind of how fast you metabolize caffeine personally.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say have a latte at 6 o'clock,
Yeah.
you've still got half of that caffeine floating around in your bloodstream at 12 o'clock at
12
night.
o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And caffeine's like going to have a massive impact on the quality of your sleep.
Yeah.
Good point.
Just like an anecdote from my own personal experience, back in the day when I used to like go into the gym 6 days a week, I'd go and get a Monster after the gym at like 10 at night, and I think, it doesn't, I can sleep, no problem. I can get sleep fine on one of those
Yeah.
massive cans of Monster.
Yeah.
Wake up in the morning and feel absolutely disgusting, like hungover almost, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't go to my lectures, nothing. And I could never understand, why is it some days that I feel like that and others not? And I
It's that
realised it was
particular
the
substance.
caffeine, yeah.
Mm.
And now, this is why I'm pretty militant with caffeine. Decaf from 12 o'clock in the day, I'll always have decaf.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I try to.
Not saying definitely, but you say that you were able to get off to sleep fine,
Yeah.
but maybe it was like disturbing the stages of your sleep
Yeah.
somehow.
Well, I think there's probably some science behind that, but it's not. I don't know it.
Yeah, yeah.
About how it actually impacts that quality, and it must do, because to
Inhibits
wake up
sleep
feeling, yeah.
Oh, and just like you were saying earlier, you said that you had a Coke the other night at
Yeah.
the cinema.
Yeah. And last night I went to the cinema and I had a can of Coke and woke up this morning. I felt exhausted all day. I've been literally craving sugary food all day, and it would just be interesting if that's kind of the reason, because nothing else had really changed. Like it was just that, and that's not something I'd usually do.
Okay.
Like in the week.
Yeah.
Like
and
even though it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't caffeine. Like
Yeah.
coffee.
Interesting.
Yeah.
did you get to sleep in your normal regime?
Yeah, got to sleep fine.
Yeah.
If anything, a bit later than normal.
But it's just the quality, you think.
Yeah. I don't know. Interesting, but
So looking at the energy drinks again with the children consuming them,
yeah.
and again education, how are they going to perform, at school or college environment, or even as you mentioned, say university environment, if they are full of caffeine and they're trying to revise for, big exams or pass a module as
Yeah.
such? How do you think that's going to affect their concentration?
Well, I think kind of having seen young people on the streets like walking to school holding cans of Monster, that's quite terrifying. And again, like the brain is so wonderfully complex that the developing brain, like whatever it's doing, it's like you need to look after it. And I don't know how caffeine's impacting on that.
Yeah.
Because I definitely think there's certain benefits to caffeine, like when you're revising for your exams and stuff, if used correctly, like
Responsibly,
it
is it
can
really?
make you concentrate for. But I don't know. I don't think that's good at all.
No, and it can become very addictive. Like
It
we
is
were
addictive,
saying,
yeah.
Monsters taste nice.
Yeah.
Energy drinks taste good.
Yeah,
And it makes you want more.
yeah. Like,
But you're already at like 200 milligrams of caffeine in your body.
Yeah.
Do you really, do you need another one?
exactly, and it's telling a kid like not to have that. It's like, well, why would I not? Because
Yeah.
they taste good. They're marketed. You know,
Yeah,
they're cool
Mm.
to drink them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's scary.
And I mean, like, mental health, even in youngsters, is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
You know, with like anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And I'm not putting it down to just caffeine, but I really do think that, you know, if kids are hooked on caffeine and energy drinks, that can't be helping their mental state. And especially if they're not getting the sleep of an evening,
Yeah.
and then they're coming
Because they're
to
on
school.
their iPads, on their phones until 1 in the morning. You know, it's just all of these things definitely could be playing a part.
Has a massive
I think.
impact, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Going back to what we were saying, we're really interested in the circadian rhythms. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So,
Yeah.
as I was saying before, like the body systems, they're all kind of in cyclical nature. So like even just things like the menstrual cycle, it's all perfectly timed. Everything's, your body's doing its thing. So that's it with the circadian rhythm. So what it is it's your body clock, and it's roughly around 24 hours, which is convenient.
Yes.
So it's basically driven by 2 hormones, driven by cortisol and melatonin. And it's basically what's driving kind of our sleep-wake cycle, essentially, but also loads of processes in the body are governed by it, and we can make certain drugs work better at certain times depending on when they're active, like all this sort of stuff. It's really interesting. But so the circadian rhythm is cortisol rises in the morning when you're asleep, kind of to get you up.
Yeah.
And then melatonin will rise during the night time, kind of in the evening, and it tells you to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So we're going back to kind of adenosine, what I was saying before.
Yeah.
Adenosine is the reason we need to sleep,
Yeah.
but melatonin is what drives us to go to sleep.
Okay.
So if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So when we've got, let me just think, hang on, let me pause this bit a second, I just need to. Right, I've got it. Just going back, so what kind of suppresses the release of melatonin is light, and sunlight in particular.
Yeah.
It emits, I think it's 10,000 lux, which is how light's measured, and that's what we need to activate these melanopsin receptors in the back of our eyes to suppress melatonin release. So in the morning, when you're out in sunlight, that's suppressing the melatonin, and all of your circadian rhythm is all kind of ticking over nicely.
Yeah.
But when you've got melatonin starting to rise in the evening, and you're looking at a phone that's emitting these blue lights that are stopping the melatonin, it's then going to make it really difficult to fall asleep, because your body's like, well, it's time to get up.
Yeah.
And it's all just a bit mixed
So
up.
you're out of sync.
Out of sync, literally, yeah.
That was the next question. How can we get in sync with this circadian rhythm? What would you suggest?
So this is another thing from Matthew Walker, so I'm not claiming this one. But essentially in the morning, one of the best things you can do, I think Dr. Chatterjee talks about this a lot, and go outside, sunlight, one of the best ways you can get your circadian rhythm back into its kind of how it should be. So as soon as you get up in the morning, just going outside for 10 to 20 minutes. And this is kind of what they suggest as well when you're jet lagged, to get into that kind of whatever time zone you're in, that to get your circadian rhythm and matching that. Go outside in the morning of that time zone, and it will just help reset it.
Okay.
So going outside, rain or shine.
Yeah.
Best.
Can being out of sync with your circadian rhythm cause any negative effects on our health?
Well, I'm not 100% sure of kind of, I couldn't reel off a list of things, but one thing that's really, really interesting is, do you know when the clocks go forward and back in spring and autumn, there's an increase in heart attacks, like in the days following that. So that suggests to me, even just an hour out of sync is like going to have a detrimental effect on your health. But I guess
there is a detrimental effect.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's just not like from observational studies they've shown that, but I think that's just really interesting. And
Definitely.
Yeah, that's crazy. So if we just reflect on, you know, all of the things that we've just spoken about, could you give us and the listeners maybe like 1 or 2 tips per topic? So through sleep, caffeine and circadian rhythm that are going to help them, you know, within their lifestyle.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to say, because I'm not a doctor, I don't want to say this is my advice, but this is stuff that I've tried myself, and this is kind of what the professionals and particularly Matthew Walker would say. So go for it on each of the topics, because I can't remember what we've talked about.
Yeah, so number 1, what would be your top tip on sleep?
Just get enough sleep, make it a priority. you know, you don't have to be as kind of crazy about it as me, but between 7 and 9 hours a night, prioritise it. Don't cut it out. It's one of the best things you can do for your health and your longevity. So do that.
A regular routine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then caffeine.
Caffeine after 12 o'clock, decaf.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or, you know, herbal teas. But if you like drinking coffee, then decaf.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely I've noticed a difference that of an evening I'm a lot more relaxed since I've started to not have it past 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I probably won't have decaf after 12 either.
Yeah.
Sometimes I may want it just because of that old habit.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely noticing that I am relaxing a lot more of an evening. And then, you know, top tip for circadian rhythm.
Go outside in the mornings.
Yeah.
Easiest thing you can do, just, you know, expose your eyes to proper sunlight,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the evenings minimise, you know, blue light emitting screens.
Yeah. I suppose that's quite hard with, you know, in the winter.
Yeah,
when some people are getting up, you know, very early for
difficult.
work.
And that's kind of the reason why. Have you heard of the condition like SAD,
Mhm.
like seasonal
Yeah.
affective disorder? That causes you to have a low mood in the winter, possibly, you know, because of the lack of sunlight.
Yeah.
You can get the lights, can't you? I've advised some of my clients to
Yeah.
get the lamps that they can look at the light
The sad lamps.
in the winter mornings, as it were.
I know
Yeah.
I've been taking vitamin D, and I know that
Yeah.
definitely helps from sunlight. But I've noticed that my mood has been pretty consistent even through the winter.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not a fanatic on vitamins and minerals. But I can say from my experience that I've been dosing myself up on it all winter,
Yeah.
and I feel
Well,
great.
I think the recommendations are that everyone should be supplementing vitamin D from like October to March, because there's not enough
there's no
sunlight
sunlight,
around, and
is
we're
there?
deficient in it, and
Yeah,
that can certainly
yeah.
have an impact on kind of your general health and your mental health.
Definitely. But yeah, it was great speaking with you, Beth.
Lovely.
And
Fantastic.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Beth.
thanks for coming on the show.
I'll see you again.
Cheers.
Cheers.